The latest news from around the world. 94.4 Spice FM.
Good morning. I'm Robert Randall. A 36-year-old Kenyan chef, Maliha Mohammed, has broken the Guinness World Record for the longest cooking competition individual category after completing a 75-hour cooking marathon. Maliha has beaten the record set by Ricky Lumpin of California, USA, who cooked for 68 hours back in December 2018. Elsewhere, the Kibra by-election race could be thrown wide open after Jubilee Party indicated it was considering fielding a candidate for the seat. Party Secretary General Raphael Tuju said yesterday that the party was holding consultations and will soon make an announcement whether to field a candidate or not. The battle for the controversial 900-hectare Kanyakwar land could head back to court following fresh misunderstanding between the county government and alleged owners. Residents who lay claim to the prime land located along the Kisumu-Kakamega Road now claim the county government is frustrating their efforts to get back their land, which they lost over 50 years ago. Internationally, Australia will not postpone requirements for Kenya to have met guidelines on horticultural exports as Nairobi stares at a possible loss of the multi-billion shilling market. Kenya has been given a deadline of September this year to comply with the Zero Pest Tolerance Directive on all flowers that are exported to Australia, failure to which they will be banned from accessing the market. Finally, in sports, Stanbic Mwamba beat Menengai Cream and Homeboys RFC 12-7 to win the Pinslow Sevens title in the finals held at Nakuru Athletics Club. Mwamba's Collins Njeri touched down a few minutes to the second half before Tony Omondi converted for a 7-0 lead. And that's the news. I'm Robert Randall.
Spice up your life. Traffic.
Yeah, there seems to still be a mess around Westlands, what used to be the Westlands roundabout, and the construction that's going on around Sarri Centre is bringing quite a lot of drama. People trying to get into and out of Westlands and entering into the CBD, so people are using alternative routes or going through the back of Chiromo. Alright, on Mombasa Road, things are moving smoothly past GM now, out of Cabanas and heading down towards Airtel. Let's see how we can keep people moving. Kiambu Road also is moving very smoothly this morning, but unfortunately, right outside Muthaiga, there has been an accident and there's a snarl up right there as well. Minor accidents there at Allsops, and traffic is building up on that road as it gets to 7 and everybody is pulling into the roads now. Langata Road is moving slowly, hoping to speed that up as well, and Ngong Road is also moving slowly as traffic builds up.
Mature, intelligent talk every morning. Spice up yourself. Mornings done right. 94.4 Spice FM.
Online, www.spicefm.co.ke. 4 minutes past 7 o'clock. Good morning, and how are you doing? This is the Situation Room on Spice FM. In the studio this morning, CT Muga. Whoa, whoa, whoa. All right, I had to do something about that. And then we also have Njeri Thorne in the studio. Good morning, Njeri.
Good morning.
How are you?
Very good, thanks.
Well, we also have Okoh. Do I have to keep saying Okoh?
Bright and shiny, Eric.
Bright and shiny.
Bright and shiny.
Okoh. My name is Eric Latiff, and this is the Situation Room where we are going to discuss issues, going hammer and tongs on them. And let's start with what you have this morning for us, CT.
Well, one of the things that always attracts the attention of anyone who pays attention to any media information is what the banks are doing. And the thing that happens every time that banks sort of like draw our attention to them is when they talk to us about the monies they have made in any financial year. And over the years, it has moved to the point where it can't be money if it isn't in the 2-digit billions. And what is of interest is that if you look at the take-home package that the CEOs of some of the leading banks in this country have, again, if you look at it from an annual perspective, now this isn't in the 2-digit billion range, but it's in the 3-digit million range. Now, when you do the maths, say someone earns 300 million shillings or 360 million shillings a year. If you do the maths, How many millions is that per month? Now, the amount of money may not even seem to matter, but when you consider that you are talking about a country where a large number of people do not have any clue as to what they will eat that day, you then have to ask the question, what is the role of banks in developing this particular country? Now, if you take another look at what previously was considered the non-banking sector, and this was just simply because of legislation really, and you look at the growth, the exponential growth of the SACCOs, and then you look at now the digitally controlled, the ICT controlled money market, you actually have to wonder, this shift, why has it been so rapid and why has it grown so much? Because if you think about, say, M-Pesa, which is of course our most popular non-banking banking system, you will find that the money that they turn around is not in the billions, it's actually in the trillions. They've entered the trillion market. For something to be this popular and for people to use it as much as they do, it must mean it works for them. Now the question that I'm asking this morning is this. Are our banks, and most of them are publicly quoted, the common mwananchi, the common man in this country has a stake in it. Do they look after the interest of the common man? Do they look after the interest of their shareholders? What role beyond paying taxes do they play in developing this country and in getting this country to move forward financially?
Good questions. What's your position on that?
My position is simply this. Our banks have had a free rein and a free ride for doing whatever they like, when they like, as and when. This must come to a stop.
All right. Banks must be halted in whatever they've been doing. Having a free rein over and over again. Let's hear what you have to say about this. Njeri?
I'm trying to see where CT is coming from. I mean, this is the private sector. Are we asking that they play a role in the development of the country out of, goodwill or CSR, or because it's a profit-making entity, they have no duty whatsoever. I mean, other than sort of just ethically, perhaps, wanting to be part of Kenya. It's the private sector. They have no duty to develop the country per se. Of course, they would want a developed and conducive economy because they can make even more money, so that probably would be their angle. But in as far as developing the country, I don't see them having a role, and I don't think there's a duty for them to develop the country.
So what you're saying is that beyond paying taxes, they shouldn't be
Which is a huge, beyond paying, what do you want them? Health services?
Yes.
Education?
CSR?
CSR.
No. The bank, in terms of development, they've been very good in terms of loans and things. So they've helped entrepreneurship. Well, it's created employment, which is development. If there's entrepreneurs making money, they can create jobs, which is employment. And so, yes, they've contributed that way. But I can't think of any banks globally other than World Bank, which lends money at extortionate rates and so on and gives really harsh terms to African countries. I don't know of any private banks that are private, profit-making entities that are responsible for developing their countries per se, unless you had an angle I didn't understand.
You understood me perfectly.
Did I?
Yes, you did. The moment banks have shareholders, yes, they may be private, yes, but they do have a duty to their shareholders.
Okay,
and in this country, the shareholders are locals, and these locals, very locals.
Shareholders being people who hold shares, so they get dividends and so on.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
Which is,
yes,
drop in the ocean in the country.
My argument is this: if I look at what the CEOs of, say, the top 10 banks in this country supposedly earn, and I look at, for instance, whatever it is paid out in terms of dividends to the so-called shareholders.
Right, okay.
Yes. And I'm asking the question, an economy such as this one of ours, is it actually is a moral, ethical issue here.
Is that disparity justifiable?
Yes. See, I told you got me the first time. You understood me perfectly.
It's $1 million bob a month if you're talking about 300 million.
No.
$1 million bob a day, rather.
Yeah,
$1 million bob a day, give or take,
Yes.
take away Jamhuri Day and Mashujaa Day. They don't get paid those days, I guess. So it adds up to 300.
If you look at their bonuses.
So what's your bone of contention? What are you upset about?
No, my bone of contention is this. You cannot, on the one hand, talk about, you see, if banks didn't want to present themselves as people who actually are out to provide some social service, if they were purely profitable, they weren't even pretending, I wouldn't have this debate.
Okay.
I wouldn't even raise it because you don't hear me talk about Bidco oil. You don't hear me talking about General Motors. No, you don't hear me talk about them because they do not pretend. They are there to make money, and that's what they do.
But banks, you feel, pretend?
They want to present themselves as being big on CSR.
Is that a marketing strategy or a gimmick as opposed to...
Whatever it is...
It's not a gimmick. It's actually a marketing strategy.
Whatever it is. But let me further it. If you ask, on average, what a teller or a simple employee in a bank earns, again, the disparity between the really top managers, the disparity is massive. Why this is an issue, Njeri, is this. Every year, without fail, every so often in the course of a year, there'll be some issue, some spoken of, some whispered about, some publicized in the paper about bank employees being involved in some massive scandal that has involved some massive losses. It isn't once, it isn't twice, it is often.
Actually, interestingly enough, they don't publish how often it happens because you'd lose trust and confidence in the banks. So you find a lot of banks keep it internal. So there's a lot more fraud within banks that goes on. And you just never get to hear about it.
Ndu, what's your take on this?
Well, I'm just looking at,
At the two of them.
yeah, literally looking at two of them. But then now, when you look across the different banking, the banking firms that we do have, just look at their slogans and what they say. I can't quote each and every one of them, but
are you?
Or here for you, or
Yes.
Here to
Here
stay.
for good.
This kind of thing. We're looking at institutions that have made a promise to be there for and amongst the people. So they're actually obviously wanting to be part of the framework of the society. Now, for me, if you make that promise to say that, this is where we are, it's not, it goes beyond just being then about money and the profits that you make, because then you're pandering to the livelihood of this individual who wants to come and put their money with you, who wants to invest their money with you, who wants to store their money with you. You're basically saying that we are going to be here with you as a partner. We will show you how to use this money. Of course, it comes to their benefit. However, so for me, if you do make that promise initially when you're coming to people or coming to individuals in a particular society and saying that we are here to support you in this one way or the other, then definitely you are there for the development. I don't know if
they're
it's
for their customers, darling.
Yeah, they're there for their customers, and the customers
not for the Mwananchi and the country.
It's not for everybody else.
It's for the customer.
Yes, but that customer
is the Mwananchi.
That customer also,
and they are there for them. But as you know,
they're there for the betterment of their customer when it comes to their finances.
They're
for
there
sure.
for the profits, and they sort of capitalize.
So this is what CT is saying. It's a business. So there is some kind of
and it provides employment, so it does contribute to the economy, and they pay their taxes, and that's all they owe.
I think
there is some kind of pretense when they
we're
come
in a
forth and say that
country. I mean,
so that we come and say we're here for you.
All this wouldn't really be such a big hoo-ha if you didn't look at just one business. It's called Safaricom. You look at what they make. You look at the CSR that they have towards the public, towards their employees. They take what the remunerations they give their employees. Essentially, they are very well rounded in their consideration for their employees, the society around them,
right.
And the community, and everybody.
So we do have a benchmark. We're saying they make a ton of money, but they also give out a ton of money. And we see where it goes. Now, what I'm saying, that disparity, where the problem arises is this. If you look at what the late Bob Collymore made, and the profits his company makes, if you take the five top banks in this country and add up what their profits are per year, it is still less than what Safaricom makes in a year. It is less than what Safaricom makes in a year. Yet Bob Collymore earns less than the CEO, earned less than the CEO of Equity, and less than the CEO of KCB, and less than the CEO of Coop Bank.
Maybe that's their own remuneration policy. Look, City.
I am not.
I
trying
know.
to set
Why
policy.
are you trying to govern the private sector?
I'm not trying to
on
govern
what they want to do.
I am calling them out and saying
It's unethical.
yes. There is
Based
a
on
lot.
what? It's a capitalist environment.
This issue of ethics ethics and pay was actually a global debate, especially in the financial sector. Those whole issue of, how much CEOs are making in bonuses versus how much profit they're making versus what they're doing.
It should be the shareholders complaining that more of this should be going towards our dividends.
It's a global issue.
But I am not a shareholder.
Oh, is that the issue?
The issue is the shareholders are the so-called mwananchi.
No, the shareholders are the customers, so it's not necessarily the mwananchi.
But who is the mwananchi?
Well, mwananchi, when we talk about mwananchi, you're talking of nationhood. That's the impression I got.
No,
when you talk about developing the
talking about
country.
the actual
You're
people.
talking about the citizenry, the electorate, the nationhood.
No.
But mwananchi, you're talking about customers here.
Who are
And
the people?
dividends.
But look, the customers of the bank begins with individuals. It's not a
Okay,
group
but let's
activity.
not talk about developing the country. Let's not use those patriotic terms and so on.
Actually, you
This
must.
is a capitalist environment. You're
You
talking about
must.
customers. You're talking about profits and dividends. Has nothing to do with development of the nation.
If you conduct your business within the boundaries of a country, and the
Oh,
people
we're-
of that
we're stretching
country,
it a bit
I am
here.
stretching
Okay, go on,
And
uh-huh.
the people of that country are part and parcel of your profit-making process.
Right.
Something is owed.
What?
In a sense,
Something is owed to everybody? Or to just the people who are the customers and willing to invest? I mean, then every company owes everybody everything. I mean, what sort of...
It's you stretching it now.
No.
I merely said
I'm going
this.
along with your theory.
I am saying this.
Mm-hmm.
You have a situation where you have this capitalist.
Mm-hmm.
Why don't I take this argument out of our country and look at, say, the UK,
Right.
where the same yesterday in the papers, the business column, Standard Chartered,
Mm-hmm.
the shareholders kicked a huge fuss about these same remunerations for the CEO. Huge
Right.
fuss.
Which is
Huge.
what I'm saying. It's a global issue.
It is a global issue. It is a global issue. The antitrust laws in the US are premised on this very thinking that I'm forwarding, that you cannot have people who have a certain position and a certain position of power simply being allowed to do what they like, how they like, when they like.
Okay, so some corporate governance needs to come in. But
What
I
would
see
you
from
like
a
them to do,
shareholder's
though?
position, I see that. I now get your point. If that's what you're complaining about, that shareholders are saying all these profits are going towards paying sort of senior executives, and they could be going towards profits, which could
Profits
be given
and
to us as
even paying
dividends.
other staff members, because theft, yes, other people who work within the banks. If you look at the people who've been accused of defrauding banks, it isn't their top management.
And their salaries are incomparable with the people who
Oh.
are at top.
But that's
Yeah.
not an excuse to defraud a bank because you're on a low
I'm
wage.
That's the reason.
I'm not supporting theft.
It's not a defense.
I'm not supporting theft. I am saying that when you have an increase of an illegal activity that hitherto did not look, the banking sector was revered. The banking sector was where everybody wanted to work because the very thing I'm saying existed. There was parity. You knew that when you worked for a bank, this would happen. You'd get a loan for a car. You do this. I'm saying all these things that once upon a time happened. Well, I'll be
They'll
told
disappear.
times change. Yes, they do. But then how do you explain the CEOs earning some amount of money that you can't even write?
Okay, so it is intuitively unfair. I understand what you're saying. But
Yes.
that's what capitalism is.
That's why it has to be pointed out that it doesn't have to be business as usual.
What's your solution?
I don't have a solution. I am
All
merely
right.
suggesting.
So beyond the remuneration, what else do you see ailing the financial sector, the banks? in
Interest
particular?
rates. Now that's something we can complain about.
Again, what Njeri is mentioning is what this impunity brings about. Every time there's
So
an
they've
issue
got-
of interest rates, the banks fight it and fight it.
They go
and
back. They
fight
push
it
back hard.
and fight it. Yes. And yet, the question you're asking is, must we pay those interest rates for banks to make money? Must banks make the billions that they make?
Well, there has been a very big push to amend and actually just repeal the entire law that has started capping them. What is it that we are telling the banks to do? We're telling the banks, we don't want to impose a formula on how you're going to cap your interest rates.
We must impose a formula.
But we must.
There
we
is a
want-
formula.
Yeah, but which is what they're fighting.
Yeah.
Which
They
is what
fight
they're
it every
fighting,
time.
right?
And there must be something that everybody can come together
And they want us to
agree
tell
on
them,
essentially.
we don't want to impose a formula on you, but we want you to be ethical and
They want to be.
thinking and
I think the only way to
consider
I
it-
think the only way to do it in this case, because you will have those arguments that come up, whether you say this number or you put in this cap, there are those arguments that will come up. So it's necessary that a formula be put in place that everybody follows, regardless of.
Now,
Without that, you will always have these arguments that, or the pushback or the fighting when it comes to interest rate caps and things like this.
And
Let me
people
ask
have come and
let
argued
me
that
ask a
and said,
question.
because of that,
Let me ask, how is it that countries that we consider to have developed or referred to as developed countries, how is it that interest rates that they charge on their loans and all these banking activities are as low as 5% or 6%? And ours, what they tell you and what they eventually charge you are usually at variance. You'll be told it's 15%. When you do the maths, it comes around 25, sometimes even 32.
Yeah, well, there's a number of factors, economies of scale.
The
We've only
effective
got-
rate.
How many mortgages do we have in this country? 5,000, 10,000 max?
now they're now close to 20,000.
20,000, let's say, as opposed
More
to
than half a century after
a million
independence.
mortgages in the UK.
But allow me to ask the
and
question.
also to mitigate for non-paying of loans as well. That's why you have high interest
When you have
rates.
high interest rates, you
It's
actually
harder to enforce payment.
Not
here
only
than
that,
it is.
you are asking for default.
when you have high interest
Yes.
rates,
You're basically
Yeah,
pushing
that's
people into a situation where they're not going to be able to pay.
There's a
But the
parallel.
banks are still making money. They've got the formula right.
No, they
You
haven't.
pay for
There's
the- you
something
pay for
you
that.
might find it unfair, but they are making money.
You
They
pay the
really
insurance
are.
on this particular loan
so here's the argument
right
that has
from
been
the
advanced
start.
in the last since Jude Jomo's law came into effect. They've said, credit to the small enterprises has basically been killed. Credit to individuals who don't have a huge collateral has reduced. So lending per se to the economy has reduced. So banks are basically just lending to the government because it's safer,
Yeah,
it's
that's what's
it's
happening.
better, and it makes more sense to them.
It is surer.
But I also look at it and see, like, this was a cartel kind of move. They sit and decide.
But
Well,
banks are a cartel.
We can still lend this one borrower who's a good borrower. Let's lend this bank. Let's lend the government rather, and prove a point that we are not supporting the economy. We are not being able to fund the economy. We are not being able to lend to small businesses. But at the end of the day, profits still in the billions. So they haven't made losses.
It is a cartel because the banking sector in this country, 90% plus of it is actually controlled by around 7 banks. The other small banks, Jamie Bora, Jamie Not So Bora, and other ones who are in the market now have to scramble for the other 10%.
The small ones.
They really, yes.
Those are, I think those are tier 4. I think there's tier 1, tier 2, tier
Yes,
3,
yes.
and then there's tier 4.
But you see, there is a history that one can draw from. The formation of what you call the federal bank in the US, it came about as a situation of what we currently have in this country, where some banks more or less dictate what happens financially.
Yes.
And they realize this is dangerous. It's actually dangerous. That's why the Federal Reserve Bank was formed. Because people like Morgan Guarantee and all these other fellows, it was just a cartel of guys who sit together and decide what they want to do. Not very recently, we had a problem with 2 banks. There was Imperial Bank and there was Chase Bank. I found the goings on strange, to say the very least. I don't ever remember, unless someone can correct me here, reading anywhere that the banks were insolvent. I don't remember seeing it anywhere. But yet, the speed, the haste with which people came in to take over and to do what I said, why? Why are people rushing to take over a bank which we are being told has failed? Why?
Is in problems.
Do people buy sinking ships? And there was a rush. Chase Bank, the same. So you figure, no, there's more to this. And the people who want to buy those banks are the same. It's not as though they're different. Now, National Bank hasn't even been limping. National Bank got crippled a heck of a long time ago. Yes. Well, now it's being taken over. So, we have a situation here where, as I said, some of those huge banks they actually make decisions, and they're a strong lobby group. Now, when they are now directly involved in lending the government as they are, their position is even stronger. So, the common man or this so-called depositor, this so-called account holder, and what they want and what they need becomes completely irrelevant. By the way, this isn't the first time this has happened in this country. In fact, this is mild compared to what happened in the 90s. Because in the 90s, you had a situation where interest rates had gotten up to even 40%.
Even 40%.
Even above.
Yes. People actually lost a lot, and banks would come quickly to auction you out.
Speedily.
In fact, now the law actually bars them from coming so fast. But in those days, in the 90s,
before you could say, Jack, gone.
You default the first 2 days.
They're on you.
The hammer is falling on you.
And they're selling your house at a fraction of what it actually costs. Again, as you say, correct. Legislation that we mentioned here helped because a halt was put to that.
Right.
I'm simply saying that if something is not checked, it can.
Are you calling for further legislation, further regulation
for
of the banking sector?
further.
You're saying that this is not enough.
No, and I'm saying we need to look at the interest rates. We need to ask that question: must banks make these billions? Must they? Must they? Because when you lend to the government, it means you have actually mopped up liquidity and you have put it in the hands of one institution. In the absence of the vortex of the continual movement of money in the country, this thing we call development and growth cannot happen. So they are actually being involved right now in halting growth. That's the point I'm making again.
So stop the government from borrowing locally.
No, the government borrows if they pay for it. That's a business transaction.
Stop it from borrowing locally. Because when the government is also borrowing locally, it actually does exacerbate this situation.
It impacts the smaller businesses.
Yes. Because, I mean, as a financial institution, are you going to lend to government or are you going to lend to do an enterprise?
You're going to lend to government.
Well, definitely.
Do and pals.
Well, definitely you would. I mean, because of the surety that you have as a bank that, you know, it's one and it is the government, because now there's assurance that one, you'll get your money back and then you can make demands that will come through. Plus you're domiciled in that particular country as a bank. I think that it does exacerbate the economical situation which we are in right now, with the stringent rules and the interest caps that we do have a problem. And then because what that does is that rules out the option of further development of this individual that we're talking about who deposits his or her money within the bank. Now, if you're not able to borrow for your own development from this bank with rates that now would allow you to continue, then, you know, you're stuck and you're crippled. Beg to borrow the term, you're also crippled. So then what do you do? And then now, again, we said you default, by chance of default, then you're even put in a worse situation. So I do agree that there need to be controlled formulas where now these interest rates, for example, are capped at, and then now we can see a situation where people can then grow and develop themselves. Now, I understand that it may not be their mandate to come in and to assist with the development principles of any nation. However, when they are in that particular country and operating with that particular country, I think there are certain things that need to be taken into consideration, and legislation surely should be looked at. Yes, they can come in a capitalist framework, come in to make their own money. However, there are other things that must be considered.
Let's do a quick round. What's your position on what CT is saying this morning? Interest rates, banks and ethics.
Look further into legislation. 100%, I absolutely agree. And you know, it's kind of like a sheep coming in wolf's clothing, because you say it looks very nice. Okay, you're going to offer me 1, 2, 3. You've come in and you've told me I can do A, B, C, D under this particular framework. But then my eyes are open. This fine print which they ask us to read, maybe we should read. But the fine print that they ask us to read several times, unfortunately, we don't know what it means before we sign on the dotted line. So legislation, yes, should be looked further into so that we can see what it is that we are dealing with.
Njeri, where do you stand?
It's an interesting one because, as I say, intuitively, it does seem unjust that, you know, CEOs are being paid 300 million and, you know, your teller is paid 30,000 a month, which is what annually?
Monthly, so annually
300,000, let's say. 300,000. But then again, it's across different sort of sectors. And look at football, for instance. Look at how much the players are paid. So maybe it's to fetch and net the best talent. There's that. And it's to attract the best talent. I don't think it's something the government can legislate and interfere with. It's a private entity. So it is what it is. I think shareholders can make some noise about it in that they want, you know, more money coming in as profits and therefore dividends. But I also think there's some sort of tax, I'm not sort of too clear on this, but there's some sort of tax avoidance that happens in paying CEOs that much as opposed to declaring it in profits.
Well, it's a business practice. That's where I stand. Business is business. Let people run their business the way they see fit. I agree on the issue of regulation in some sectors, especially when it comes to interest rates. I don't think we need to over-regulate the banking sector, though. I think we need to let the market forces play. They are a central cog in how the markets operate in the country or even in the region. We should let them do that. However, the central bank should be much more diligent and vigilant on how the banks are operating, what they are doing when it comes to these moral issues, raise the moral issues, from a moral perspective, and let the shareholders demand more from their banks. And I think they've been getting. The shareholders have just been getting. When a bank is declaring all these millions in profit, shareholders are happy. And that's what it is. CT.
When you have a precedent in any matter, the reason why the law, from the way I understand it, take precedence as a very, very important part in determining issues and cases. We do not have to reinvent the wheel here. Institutions are run by human beings, and human beings are run by whatever it is that they consider to be the value system that benefits them. The institution is just the institution, but so long as you have a culture where it is believed that it's really a winner-take-all attitude, where it doesn't really matter how much the person is paid. So long as you have this huge profit and the government gets their share of the profit, then it is okay. Unfortunately, societies don't quite function that way. They never do. What legislation does, legislation curbs that aspect of human nature that is likely to selfishly look at its own interest and to ensure that there is, again, the word parity. Legislation doesn't solve all problems, but it certainly ensures that there
you can't
is a
legislate
balance.
for morality and ethics. You simply can't.
Thank you very much. Thank
actually,
you, City. We hear you. This is a Situation Room right here on Spice FM. Good morning. My name is Eric Latiff. I'm in the studio with Okoh, Njeri Thorne, and CT Muga. We are discussing issues, and we're coming back shortly after this.
How well do you know your country? Given a chance, where would you go? Not so many places, huh? Would you even know how to get there? Yes? No? Maybe? I don't know. Well, oh ye gallivanters and tourists alike, here is your chance to not only know, but also visit amazing destinations in Kenya with complete recommendations, guides, and tips on accommodation spots, wellness stops, and food joints all over Kenya. How, you ask? Courtesy of the biggest locally targeted tours and travel magazine, Travelogue. Travelogue is your monthly pull-out magazine in the Standard newspaper every first Thursday of the month. With Travelogue, enjoy the beauty of life that Kenya has to offer. Visit exotic and hidden destinations, be part of amazing conservation campaigns and projects as you simply enjoy Kenya. It's our way of putting Kenya on the map. Grab your copy and be aboard the fun wagon as you improve the quality of your local travel experiences. Travelogue, Jione Kenya. Tired of living your same old life? Need to spice it up and add some flavor? Well, we can help you go from living to living it up. East Africa, are you ready to be a part of the most vibrant entertainment scene with the best, freshest music, travel tips and destinations, fashion, tech and health trends, as well as your favorite celebrities' lifestyles? Introducing your favorite entertainment magazine, Pulsar, the ultimate all-in-one guide that will give you more meaning to life. Catch up with your celebrity writers and contributors to stay up to date with what's happening around you, where and how you can be a part of all that. The lifestyle guide that has been missing in your life. Pulsar. Live it up.
Are you ready? Okay.
Spice FM. Traffic.
It seems that there isn't a cooperation between the Chinese developing Ngong Road and the Japanese who are looking towards Junction, because Ngong Road users are smiling all through. Barabara iko sawa, no delays, or mwendo, they say, heading into town. All right. It seems that there was an accident in Maimahiu, and that is causing heavy traffic moving into the city from that side of things. The accident at Muthaiga actually has caused more of a snarl up than we thought in the beginning, and so hopefully that will be cleared up as soon as possible. Thika Road is moving smoothly until you get to Muthaiga roundabout, unfortunately. But Jogoo Road has cleared up, moving into town, and so has Mombasa Road, more or less. A little bit of a traffic snarl up just around Cabanas, but that moves as you get out of traffic at General Motors. Hope to keep you moving. Let us know of any incidents or accidents on the way, and we'll let you know how to get out of it.
Our SMS number is 40127. Our telephone number 0719-012-600. Also, you can tweet us at SpiceFMKE. Let us know what's happening wherever you are.
Mature, intelligent talk every morning. Spice up yourself. Mornings done right. 94.4 Spice FM.
A very good morning to you. 25 minutes to 8 o'clock. This is the Situation Room right here on Spice FM. 94.4 in Nairobi, 87.9 in Mombasa, 102.5 in Kisumu, 96.0 Nakuru, 96.7 Eldoret, 90.9 in Nyeri, 96.7 in Malindi. We are across the country and all over the world on www.spicefm.co.ke. You can watch us on radio. We are live streaming right here. My name is Latiff. In the studio with Okoh, Njeri Thorne, and CT Muga. We are taking up an issue and tearing it into bits and pieces. And Ndu has one that she'd like to put on the floor.
It tears at my heart, actually, because I look at, we continue to talk about development of nations and development of countries. The people that make up for this are human beings, blood-flowing, heart-thumping human beings. And we've looked at the emphasis that has been placed on young people and them being the future of our societies, of our nations. And specifically this morning, I want to look at teenage pregnancy and the spread of STIs amongst especially our young girls. Now, to put it into context, we're looking at girls between the age of 15 and 24, and this is the age bracket or the age group that is actually highly affected. Now, if you look at some numbers, and these are the numbers that have been put out there by the Population Fund, 378,400 adolescent girls in Kenya, aged between the age of 10 and 19, became pregnant between July 2016 and June 2017. Now, just looking at those numbers and putting that against, a little bit of research that we were able to do, young girls, and interestingly enough, young men who are engaged in, sexual relationships with these young girls are more afraid of pregnancy than we are of sexually transmitted infections or sexually transmitted diseases, as it were. Yesterday, I had very interesting phone calls with a few people, and I went to a pharmacy and I asked the question, and the pharmacist in charge on duty yesterday, of just statistics that he gave me, 24 young women came into the pharmacy, and he didn't tell me about past 11 o'clock. Between 9 and 11 of the 24 girls that came to him, 19 of them were asking for emergency contraception, yesterday being Monday. I went to another pharmacy, and out of the 9 young women that came to them in the morning before noon, 7 of them were asking for emergency contraception. And of the other one that I spoke to on the phone, of the 19 young women who came into, or young girls, let's keep it at young girls, who came into the pharmacy in those hours, 11 of them were asking for emergency contraception. Now, based on the information that they gave me, we're looking at girls who are under the age of 18 who are requesting this. And based on what they said and what they've been able to know, we have an upsurge, especially when girls are on holiday, and we're still looking at the holiday period. Interesting was that their fear is not that they will contract a disease or an infection. The fear is that they will get pregnant. Now, we have lots of young girls getting pregnant anyway. But for me, the situation should be that our sexual health and education strategies or innovations, whether as parents, whether as teachers, whether as counselors, wherever it is being done, it needs to be heightened quite a bit, because we're looking at a number of young girls who are being infected with diseases or infections that they do not even know about. So I put on my sleuth hat a little bit more yesterday, and I went and talked to a few teenage girls. And interestingly, what they said to me is this: yes, okay, we are having sex. That's true. However, what is important to us, or what we're really scared of, is getting pregnant. Okay, so how do you protect yourself against sexual transmitted infections or diseases? And the answer that came to me actually was quite shocking. And this young girl said to me yesterday, well, you know, once you're done and you take a shower, you're clean and you're fine and you will not get infected. But if you don't take something that will stop you from getting pregnant, then we really have a problem. And I'll be in trouble with my parents, I will be the shame of society, and that will be the issue. So my thing is here today, we need to do more. More advocacy needs to happen, because we have young girls now who are being infected with things like chlamydia, with things like gonorrhea, which now affects their ability to have children later on in life, and is actually affecting them on a larger scale than we actually think. Pregnancy is not the issue. Sexually transmitted diseases is. And my issue is today that we're not doing enough to protect these young girls, to give enough information in terms of what could actually happen in the future.
Thank you very much. That is investigator Ndu Okoh reporting to us this morning. And we have in the studio C.T. Muga. C.T. Muga is a social scientist who's worked extensively in the field of medical research as well, right? Now,
Actually, biomedical research.
Biomedical research.
Yes.
All right.
Specifically in the field of HIV and AIDS.
And there you go. And HIV and AIDS falls squarely down the alley of this matter we're discussing this morning. So girls are saying that, I can go and just have a cold shower and that will be fine. But pregnancy is what I really care about.
Protection from, yes.
I need protection from. And that's why they're going into chemists on Monday mornings, especially to
and
buy,
Friday evenings.
and Friday evenings to buy this. So what do you think about this?
Well, one, anecdotally speaking, think of the power of the media. One former president of South Africa, one Jacob Zuma, is the one who popularized the cold shower. The cold shower treatment. He made it universally known that
in court,
yes, that a cold shower had curative powers that were beyond human imagination. And here we have in Kenya young people telling you that a cold shower cures all STIs. Ndu has actually put forth a compelling argument. The thing that I'd like to add to what she said is, the issue is unprotected sex. Because if it is you are protected, the pregnancy that they are worried about will not occur. If you're protected, the STIs that we are talking about will also not occur. But the gap that is clear is a knowledge gap. You have a situation that young people seem to collectively believe certain things, and what they believe. Remember my saying earlier on that for most people, the perception is the truth. If they perceive that this is so, then it is so. And you, the older person, will not change their mind.
Yeah.
In the field of HIV and AIDS, a lot of work has been done in this regard. It falls under the ambit of what we refer to as behavior change intervention, meaning you have activities, you have all sorts of things that are geared towards getting a certain group of people to look at one particular issue different from the way they've been looking at it, because the way they've been looking at it is not only uninformed, but it's also dangerous. Now, how do you get young people to understand all this? You do this by beginning to understand why it is they believe what they believe, and why it is they do what they do.
If I can interject, it was interesting to hear from these young girls yesterday, and one of the things they said to me was, you know what, if I get pregnant, I'll be at the shame of my parents, I'll be at the shame of, people around me, and, I'm 18 years old, I'm 15 years old, she said, I'm 15 years old, and if I get pregnant today, where am I taking this pregnancy to? To my parents, they will shun me. There's no way. I've not finished school. Whereas, if I get a disease or an infection, I can go to hospital and I will get medication and I will be fine.
And nobody knows about it.
And nobody knows about it.
It's the shame-based element, I think, that allows for pregnancy to become more important consideration when looking at protection or not, I think. And we are a shame-based society over sort of a guilt and personalized-based society. So yeah, I think it's the fact that a pregnancy shows, for starters. So with that and the shame that comes with it, they're more likely to act to protect themselves from the pregnancy. But again, it's education. Should we be at what age should we be having sexual education, sexual health education at school? Because you're talking about 15-year-olds. Are they aware that they can have? Well, they shouldn't be, but having sex, but it can be protected sex in that from both the pregnancy and STIs. So again, a knowledge gap.
It's tricky when you consider that there are communities who happily marry off their girls at the age of 12, 13, 14. 15, in fact, you're actually old. So
You're a mother of 3.
So I must be ancient. 15-year-old.
Dinosaur.
Prehistoric.
So it's actually an issue that Njeri is raising. It's an issue of, like you said, education. It's also an issue of at what age should we start this sexual education, whether at home or at school, and what are we telling the children?
You are assuming that we need to talk to the children. I want to tell you that we need to talk to the parents.
Probably.
Let's start with the parents, and then let's start with the teachers, not the students. When you look at the issue of shame that Njeri is mentioning, you're talking about what we call stigma.
Yes.
Okay? Now, children learn from what they see more than from what they hear. Now, if you have parents and you have teachers who do not have an open mind on this particular subject, even if you mandate them to teach it, they'll be teaching it with a closed mind.
Speaking of interventions, because maybe we should look at what we can actually do to curb this this rise. What if we were to make the morning after pill a little more harder to get hold of? Because right now it's become so easy. It's over the counter. It's 50 bob, 60 bob. It's very available. And so you stop the pregnancy, but the unintended consequence of availing this morning after pill is that there'll be a rise in STIs because people stop trying to protect themselves from those because it's so easy to stop pregnancies, which is what their focus is. So there's a way maybe we can make it a prescription if we take into account that stigma and shame and people knowing is actually a driver of behavior. Maybe make it that to get the morning after pill, it has to be a doctor's prescription. So you think twice about having unprotected sex. Just thinking of creating an environment that can change behavior as opposed to trying to persuade or dissuade.
But Jerry, the issue of education, especially around AIDS.
I don't think it's just lack of education. It's, people know. It's like smoking. People know it will cause cancer, but they still do it. So it's not just... Lack of education is one aspect, but I don't think that's the only one. I think it's certain behavioral change we need to start looking at as well. So why is it there's been a rise in STIs whilst people are getting protection or are stopping pregnancies? And it's because it's actually so easy to stop the pregnancy now with the morning after pill, whereas before there were so many other considerations, and usually just the sheath, or what we call the condom in layman terms, is what people were using to stop the pregnancy. But now it's so easy to come across the morning after pill. It's 30 shillings over the counter. You can get it as many times as you want. And the unintended consequence of this is there's a prevalence of, or there's an increase or a hike in STIs.
Do you think this young men and women actually know about condoms? Yes, they do.
Of course.
Right?
Yes, they do.
So why are they finding it easier to go and buy the morning after pill and not the condom? So is there a stigma associated with condom? What is the issue about the condom?
Well, I don't think it's a stigma necessarily associated with. I think it's the whole idea of sensation, how they feel that
exactly
the
it's more
experience
pleasurable,
is more pleasurable without a condom.
And so it's also been sold to the kids, because come on, these are young children. It's also been sold to them that it's more pleasurable to go without a condom.
Yes.
So even if you stop
that might be true though.
Even
I don't think it's a concept that's been sold. If we're going to dissect this, let's be honest, it might actually be true.
It might be true, yes.
Yes.
But does it actually say that the bigger impact for them is I want to feel the pleasure and risk getting the STI?
Well, considering
they're
not having sex for reproduction, it's purely for pleasure. Yes.
They know what the condom is for.
I think not.
It protects you against STI.
Yes, they're very aware.
It protects. So if they know this, whether we tell them we are going to stifle the supply of the morning after pill.
Not stifle. I mean, it has to be an intricate sort of intervention.
We're discussing sex here. Okay.
Yes.
And it's a very powerful energy in the bodies of a human being.
Urge.
Yes, it isn't something that logic prevails over. It isn't something that
we're not rational about it.
No, it's not.
But we're predictably irrational. We know how people
Yes.
are going to behave, and if we do know how they're going to behave, we can create an environment that can drive the behavior.
Yeah.
I think the morning after pill needs to be regulated.
You are talking about young people, young.
Yes.
And the reason why there's so much enthusiasm about it is because they've just discovered the joys of this particular human endeavor.
Yes.
Okay? But to understand it and to contextualize it, just look at the number of senior people around the world who have been in some serious problems over this same
issue. Yes.
Same. So, among young people who are unaware, uninformed, are still naive, how much of an impact do you think this
it's
is
gonna
in
have?
their lives?
And remember,
what I'm trying to look at is what you said, behavioral change intervention, and even communication. I'm looking at it from the communication perspective. If we are seeing that, well, this is how people think globally, and this is how young people are thinking
This is how human
globally.
beings function.
This is
Period.
how human beings function, right? Even if we say that let's make it very difficult for you to access the morning after pill, right? We're still not dealing with the issue. And the issue here is because the issue of morning after pill, well, it has sorted out one problem. It has sorted out one problem.
No, I think
presumably,
if we can
but we
find
still have
a
the issue
direct-
of STIs.
Yes, but
and unsafe sex.
there is I feel a direct correlation of the increase in STIs and the accessibility of the morning after pill, because people are less careful because the morning after pill is so
It's readily
accessible.
available.
It's gonna sort it out.
Exactly. Secondly, the fact that it protects from pregnancy and not STIs also could lead to the rise in STIs because people are more focused on protecting from pregnancies. So I'm not saying that we should make it difficult or impossible to get the morning after pill. What I'm saying is if we take into account that stigma or shame is also a driving factor, we can harness that and say, well, let's make it also a little bit not shameful, but let's incorporate that into getting the morning after pill, whereby you maybe have to go to your doctor for a prescription. So it's not as easily available, it's not as accessible, and maybe you think twice about your, sort of protection. Just food for thought, and design something around that, because maybe the accessibility and how easy it is to get this morning after pill has created this rise in STIs, I feel.
Eric, one of the reasons why, for instance, in the attempt to fight the HIV scourge, the one thing that became obvious was that one approach was never going to resolve the problem. It has to be multi-pronged. So what Njeri is saying is completely relevant. It's relevant. What Undu is saying is relevant. What you are saying, you don't solve this problem. It isn't one pill solve all. This is one of those situations. It has to be multi-pronged. It has to be education. It has to be this. It has to be this. And they all have to act in concert. That is when you get results. One activity will not resolve the issue.
However, what Ndu has raised this morning is symptomatic of something. That there is a breakdown somewhere in communication. There's some misunderstanding or lack of awareness.
I think even those that are sending the message across also, and we look at the custodians of these young people at the time, whether it's parents, whether it's guardians, aunties. I will never forget in a situation when I had reached adolescence, and one of my aunties told me, she said, you know what, now that you've reached this level, if a boy touches you, you will become pregnant. Nothing was mentioned.
But your auntie was right.
Touched, literally touched you in this manner, you would become pregnant.
It would
Okay?
lead to.
So you can imagine that's the kind of information that's being spread. And again, the fear that's being put in you is that of pregnancy and nothing else. Nothing else is mentioned. And that is the premise, or that is the fear within which a lot of girls are operating today. That is never mentioned, so it never comes up. But you'll be surprised in studies that have been done of girls who said that their primary fear is pregnancy. Out of 400 girls in one study that was done, 322 were found to have been carrying infections, from gonorrhea to chlamydia to other things that they were walking around with unbeknownst to them. So really the fear is still, and I would say that yes, to a large percent, it's the education or the things or the messages that we are passing to these young girls. It is the information. It is wrong.
We are
information.
packaging our information wrong.
The packaging of the information is
we are miseducating the children.
No,
Apart
No.
from the Immaculate Conception, I do not
No.
know of a case where a
No.
young man looked at a woman
Look,
and she got pregnant.
You are thinking of the adolescent of your times when you were adolescents.
This is the information age.
These people know more. It's not a question of what you tell them. It's the information they acquire for themselves. And they share among themselves.
Yesterday, a 15-year-old girl told me that she believes that if after sexual intercourse she takes a shower, she would be fine and she would not get an infection.
In the information age.
Yesterday,
and
in
Njeri
the
and you were
information
telling us
age.
and-
I am
and
trying to
CT
explain.
telling us about-
I'm not,
19th.
I am not negating what you're saying. I am simply trying to explain to you that you are using a value system that may have worked when you were an adolescent. These
Are you trying
young
to call me
people,
old?
I'm calling you not young.
Beyond adolescence.
Yes. The information that we speak of rested in the arms and the minds and the surroundings of elders because they were the library, they were the Wikipedia, they were the custodians of knowledge. In this day and age, in the information age, a lot of the information that these people, young people have, they get it themselves, they share it among themselves. And believe me, if you had an inkling as to what they know, you would fall down and collapse. You're talking about, if you're talking about generational gap, you're talking about, it's not as though the urges weren't there in an early generation, but people were not propelled to seek sex. Not actively. You're talking about a generation that seeks it and don't give a damn. It's a totally different thing. And the only thing that worries them, again, it's not even what their parents will know. It's the baggage that comes with pregnancy. And the hypocritical notion that they want their parents to maintain that they're young people who know nothing about sex and don't have sex. Now that is them trying to pander to their parents' notion because they understand what their parents require, what their parents want. So they play to those rules. But they live by completely different others.
So, City, are you saying that they are aware? Are they aware of how you can contract STIs?
Yes.
Are they aware of how you can prevent
Yes.
STIs?
Yes.
Are they aware of the effects of STIs?
Yes.
So why are they still exposing themselves to STIs
I
in
started
such
by
a manner?
saying that when we are, remember the statement, I made a simple, mundane statement, we are discussing sex. Sex is a force.
It's true, it's a force. But if you had the
It isn't-
conversation,
it isn't
the
exercise
conversation
in-
that
Conversations I had yesterday
the
scared
conversation
me.
Ndu was having yesterday was not in that situation.
Yeah,
was not
but it's
in the
scary
realm.
because she's hearing it for the first time. I am talking from a perspective where I've been hearing this thing
Not for the first
a
time.
For a long
But that
time.
we're still having those conversations now in this information age. That's what is
Yes.
worrying to me.
Yes.
So what do we do about passing on the correct message?
I'm
the
trying to
correct
explain.
message here is
Let me explain what I'm trying to tell and do. When a young person talks to you, please do not presume that what they're telling you is the absolute truth of what they know. Please do
Oh, I knew
not
it was.
presume. Yes. They will tell you something.
they're telling you
To
what they
appear innocent or
Yes.
to hide any.
Yes. They're not going to tell you about the,
So no, you were
played.
played.
I was played
Definitely.
yesterday.
You were played by a teenager. So it's also possible that actually the girl knows a lot more, but then she chooses not to.
Let me ask you.
What can we do to make people not choose the wrong thing?
No.
That's the question.
Look. Adults, so-called adults, are as much to blame if we're going to throw blame as anybody.
I agree.
Because the adults themselves have issues, major issues discussing sex.
To say the word is a problem.
It's an issue.
Yes, it is.
Healthcare workers have issues, major issues discussing sex. In the field of HIV and AIDS, we determined through research and just through practice that our biggest impediment towards the solving problems around HIV had to do with healthcare workers. They had the issues. And so when a patient or someone who needed care came into their presence, they could see that this particular individual I'm talking with or talking to has an issue with this particular subject. So stigma was being promoted by the very healthcare workers who were supposed to help reduce it.
Yep.
And the reason is because they had issues with the same thing. Parents have issues with sex. Teachers have issues. And then you want them to take the pole position in solving the problem without them having been inducted into this thing we're talking about. they have to be our first target.
So it's a miseducation of our parents, and we're saying that a re-education is necessary.
It's not a miseducation.
We start from the parents and we
people
come
tell
all the way.
you what they know, or people tell you what worked for them at a certain point in time.
Would love to know what you think about this. 0719-012-600 or our SMS number 40127. We'll be taking your calls in the next hour. 0719-012-600. And also you can tweet us at SpiceFMKE. This is the Situation Room. You are with CT Muga, Njeri Thorne, Ndu Okoh, and myself, Eric Latiff. In the next hour, we'll be discussing a lot more on what's happening. For example, we'll have an issue on Njeri. What will you be raising
Today,
yes,
we'll be looking at whether the youth can get themselves out of unemployment through business.
Excellent.
youth to get yourselves out of unemployment through business, like thinking ahead. That's innovation. And then also in the next hour, we'll be talking about, should we be taxing YouTube, Netflix, Facebook, and all those things because the KRA says it like to, the government says it wants to do that? We'll be talking about that. This is the Situation Room, Spice FM 94.4 in Nairobi, 87.9 in Mombasa.